From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts.
When I was there, I found that number one, I wasn't prepared for the emotional response, one. And two, I didn't have anyone that could help coach me through that situation. I was completely on my own. I was trying to figure out heads and tails of being in the education world.
Welcome to Community Catalysts. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. In every community, there are leaders whose names may not always be in the headlines, but whose steady work keeps institutions functioning and futures possible. In our schools, that means navigating tight budgets, honoring long-held community values, and helping systems adapt to a changing world. This podcast is for leaders who understand that public service is rarely simple. It requires resilience when criticism comes, clarity when decisions are contested, and the willingness to stand on truth even when it is uncomfortable. My guest today is Charlie Cauffman, Chief Operations Officer for Washakie County School District No. 1 in Worland, Wyoming. He serves a rural district of about 1,100 students and oversees the operational side of a system balancing tradition with emerging technologies and new expectations. Charlie tells me that early in his school district career, he faced a situation that tested him deeply, and from it, he came away with a clear conviction. The truth is the truth. You cannot make everyone happy. You have to be at peace with yourself in order to lead. That experience, he says, grounded him in honesty, self-awareness, and a steadiness that does not depend on applause. I'm looking forward to exploring that experience, how its lessons continue to shape his leadership today, and what they might offer to others who are navigating difficult decisions in public service. Charlie Cauffman, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you. And let's be clear, you're talking to me tonight from Cheyenne, Wyoming. Tell everyone what you're doing in Cheyenne.
So currently we're here in our quarterly meetings. We're also in the middle of a legislative session. So in the state of Wyoming, every 5 years, we go through a recalibration of our funding model for public schools. And so we're knee deep in that process right now. We are currently working with legislators trying to get the best for our students in the future and trying to continue to provide the best education for the students of Wyoming.
This is the hands-on work of lobbying and making sure that the public education sector is well represented in front of the legislature.
Yes, it is. And also to stop the spread of misinformation, I think it's so key that we're very clear on the information that we give. Many times there's people out there that want to tell a story and they get out there very eagerly with their story. And sometimes their story isn't based on the facts that are there. And so having lived the facts every day, we have to make sure that we're very representative of our story and that we're very clear and concise. And that's a very difficult thing to do with 90 members of our local legislature. So we have a public legislature. They are elected officials. They're not paid in any way. And it is a hard thing to do to get 90 of them on the same page.
Do you have a story to share of someone who you're talking to now where you could give them the practical real-world implications of the policy decisions that they have to make?
Absolutely. So just this week, we were, my superintendent and I were communicating with our local legislator, trying to talk to her about the ramifications of what's in this legislative bill. So currently in our recalibration bill, there are some caps on there, one on superintendent salaries and one on a burden to report on the variances in a budget. And we communicated with our legislator trying to say, hey, honestly, a cap on a superintendent's salary is a very difficult thing. We're trying to get the best and brightest people here to help lead our students. And it was a very arbitrary cap. They had set a limit at 233% of the teacher's limit. And in Wyoming, we're not anywhere near that. So it felt very punitive. Felt that they were underrepresented at that piece. The other piece is that they wanted us to report on every single variance line item that went out 7.5%. Every year, we actually report to the Department of Education any variance, and we go through this sometimes it's a 3-month-long process of going through these variances. And so we communicated that, first of all, we do this already. This is just another measure you're trying to do to put on top of this. We're already doing this. And so there's a misrepresentation out there that we hide information or that we're not very vocal or are very transparent. And that's just simply not true. We account for every dime and every dollar. And so that was one struggle that we came up against, is that there's this rhetoric, unfortunately, against public education that we're trying to basically, to put it nice, to dumb down the society of America. And that's just simply not true. We work very hard to bring every student. And so when we get compared to like a charter school or a private school, they get to take the best of the best, and we get every child. So under FAPE, underneath the Federal Protections Act, for every student, we're not allowed to select which students we want or which students we take. We take them all. Basically, where we're at with that is we had to be very, very concise and clear to everyone that there's this misconception out there that we're trying to hide things, and we've not been nothing but honest. And we talk about this with our public. We talk about this with our constituents all over. And we try very hard to make sure that people know that we are very responsible. I feel a very high responsibility to the taxpayers in my district and my state.
So let's go back a little bit. I want to ask you about Washakie County. You had to coach me on the pronunciation before we started the recording, and I'm grateful to you. I've never been. I'd love to hear a bit more about Worland and Washakie County. What makes it distinctive? What is the community like on a Friday night or at a school event? You know, who are the people in your community? What's the experience of being there?
Absolutely. So it's a wonderful thing. So I'll give it a football example. So that varies on the time of year. So my favorite time of year is football, when we start our football game. So everybody in the community there, from your youngest child to your oldest citizen, they all make their way to the game. It is a Friday night tradition. And this is a community where tradition is still held very highly. You still see it's an extremely religious community, in terms of that they hold these values very sacred, of family, of community, and of trust and love and support for each other. And being a part of this community has been a blessing for me personally, because, even though they may give me a hard time on things, I know that they care, and they care about their children, and that's where that care comes from. And so Worland is just one of these communities that really does care about its people, and really holds that very highly in tradition. And so one of the reasons my family and I decided to relocate there was I wanted to raise my kids there and give them an opportunity to not only have some of the opportunities they wouldn't get elsewhere, but to feel that sense of community.
That same sense of connection that you're talking about that you would have at a Friday night at the football game, does that same sense of connection occur in public meetings and in other kind of civic gatherings as well? Does everyone really know each other?
They do. Yes, they absolutely know you and your history and where you came from. And it's a wonderful piece. And so, yes, they do. The meetings are interesting, as if there's an issue they're passionate about, they will show up in force. And generally speaking, they'll speak their mind to you. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the grocery store and someone says, "Hey, you come here." And they'll tell me about their issue, and you listen and you do the best you can with that. But they want to get that off their chest. They want you to hear it, and they wanted you to hear it from them directly.
Is there a weight of responsibility you think that you have as a chief operations officer that is different in a smaller community where everyone knows each other, everyone is so interconnected, as opposed to working in a place where there's more anonymity and it's larger? What does that weight feel like?
That weight is absolutely real. The weight...
I love the way you said that.
It's absolutely real. The weight is, you feel a personal connection and a responsibility. And so when there are issues that come up, you feel an obligation to make sure you represent every viewpoint fairly. And so you make sure that you come across not only as genuine, but that you've thought through the issues and you're not hasty on some of the things that go through. And so that weight is absolutely real. I feel it very personally as I look at these people. These are people whose kids go to school with my kids. These are people who, I see them at the grocery store. And so there is some part of that can get a little uncomfortable when, if you're going through a time where they don't see eye to eye with you, it can become uncomfortable. And it can almost feel a little personal sometimes. And so you have to remember that weight is there, but they are so highly integrated in your life.
I'm going to put you on the spot with this question. Sometimes I get invited to work with communities and do strategic planning, thinking about how communities want to advance for the future. And one of the early questions I'll ask is for everyone to answer the question, what deserves to be protected, preserved, or treated as sacred? And sacred with a small s, not the religious sacred, just the things that we say, if we're going to advance, we just have to make sure that we don't change these things, that these things are going to be protected. I know this is off the top of your head, but what do you think are some of the things that people would say deserve to be preserved, protected, and treated as sacred in the education system in your community if they were going to be talking about opportunities for the future?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. So off the top of my head, the big thing that's a sacred for our community is we're a blue collar community. And so one of the things that is sacred to them is most of these kids are not going to go to college. And so the sacred cow, I sort of say, is that we need to be able to teach them and prepare them for the workforce and be able to help them be prepared to leave when they leave high school to be able to contribute to the community. And so that is one thing that is completely sacred. We have farmers and ranchers who are very open with us. Hey, we want our kids to do welding. We want our kids to do construction. We want our kids to do the CDL so they can learn how to drive the beat trucks. And so the blue collar nature, the practical applicability is a sacred piece. And I would say that with that, that is something that they treasure. That is something that they tell us every day. They don't want them on the Chromebooks. They want them to learn real life skills, something to prepare them for the future. And so that is something that is held very high where we're at. And so that's one.
It's practical competence for the real world, but practical competence in the real world means an understanding of the use of the technology that is presently and about to be available.
Correct. And absolutely. And so that's really how we've been able to balance the two, that they can still get their hands dirty. They can still figure out manually how to do those things. But now that they understand that this is something that can help them. For fabrication, like for welding fabrication, we have a plasma table in which it's run by a pretty sophisticated computer. We show them how to be able to do these things and what it produces. And then they can still do the hands-on with the welding and work through those pieces. But now they can actually fabricate pieces that are so intricate. It's amazing to watch. And so being able to balance, technologically, the computer that could cut the plasma, or the plasma cutter that can cut within, hundredths of an inch, to then being able to go and weld and assemble these things has also been good. Another piece, this year we actually instituted a 2-part course. We're actually building an airplane and teaching them about teaching them how to be commercial. Well, they're not going to be commercial. We can only get up to a private pilot's license. But we're working with them to go through flight simulators. This is how it looks. This is how it goes through. And so it's fun because they get to be able to put the plane together. And it's actually coming along quite nice. And then being able to watch and them build the plane itself. So it's some great application between the two.
Charlie, I'm going to change the subject. One of the objectives of this podcast is to invite leaders to talk about their hard-won experiences and the lessons that they've learned from it. And we often talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of our experiences with the hope that you have something to share that others might hear and learn from so that they can avoid making those mistakes themselves. Well, this is one of the things that really interested me when you told me you wanted to be on the podcast. You told me that early in your career, you stepped into a situation that required significant budget cuts and sparked intense public reaction. Now, I don't want to embarrass you, and I don't want to embarrass anyone. I certainly don't want to inflict post-traumatic pain on you. But can I ask you to take us back there? What was happening in the district? What were the public meetings like? What was it like to be in the room when this all descended around you? Tell us about that situation.
Absolutely. So this actually occurred to me just about 6.5 years ago. I was actually in a different district. I've been in Worland for the past 5 years. I was in a prior district to this, and it was an interesting time in my life because I was so new at the profession. Upon arriving in the district, The district was in pretty severe financial straits. It had been deficit spending over $500,000 plus the prior 3 years. And so when I got there, I had some very tough decisions to make immediately. So I'm at the job less than 2 months. I see that we have overexpended our budget by $1.5 million, and how are we going to right the ship? How are we going to get this fixed? And when I brought that to my superintendent's knowledge, it wasn't helpful. It didn't go very well. He basically screamed at me, said he tried to ghost me a little bit, say I didn't know what I was talking about, and it was very difficult to get that message across.
This superintendent actually denied the $1.5 million deficit that you had uncovered?
Correct.
Okay.
And and so to give a little more context, my predecessor in that spot had not been there for almost 5 months. So they were without anyone in the financial department for almost a half a year or better. So I learned that the truth is the truth no matter what. And no matter what he said or what he did, it didn't change the fact that we needed to make significant cuts. And at that point, it was just a little over $1.1 million that we had to cut out. And so, here I am looking at myself in the mirror thinking, well, this is 1.1 million. How am I going to do this? I've been only at this for a few months. What am I going to do? And that superintendent did not make it easy on me. So I communicated with our board chairman, this is what's going on. And actually, he was extremely understanding. He took me aside, explained a few things that had happened, and he was aware. And so I worked with him and said, well, we need to do this. And so he suggested some public meetings, to have the board meeting in public. I absolutely did get torn apart. How could this happen? Where did this overspend happen? What have you been doing? How have you been mismanaging our funds? And here I am 3 months into the job. I had little to nothing to do with it.
Charlie, to make sure I understand, you got torn apart. This did not get the superintendent torn apart or the members of the school board torn apart?
Let me clarify probably a little bit better. So we all sat up at the top of the stage in this auditorium. So we're all sitting in one line, all of us. And many of the comments were directed at me. The first several comments were directed, how come we didn't know about this sooner?
Let me make sure I understand. In this situation, are you like a whistleblower and you're the one who's uncovered this and is reporting it? And in that sense, are you kind of alone and being held out in this way? Or was the school board and the superintendent, were they there with you and kind of absorbing this simultaneously?
So they were absorbing it simultaneously. Thankfully, I did have a pretty good board chair who helped me through this, but it didn't hurt any less, I guess. So the comments were, how come we didn't know about this sooner? And as you go, and as the public comments continued to go, it was very difficult to communicate with them because it was very hostile, because this meant, well, who's going to lose their job? Who's going to make the cut? What are we going to do to fix this problem? And I had actually provided several reports to the community as part of the board packet. It was actually kind of funny because a couple of the comments were shaking my reports at me, and the board chair, and saying, according to this information, this is where he is. And I had to laugh. I was like, yeah, I realized that because I wrote that. And so it was hard. It was a very difficult couple meetings. It felt very personal. It just did maybe my board chair felt that way too. And honestly, in conversations after that with him, he was a great support for me and helped me realize that I wasn't there alone, even though most of the comments were directed at me and they couldn't really answer some of the questions, that they had my back. And I felt very appreciative of that.
Let me ask you about this meeting a little bit further. Was this a meeting just to disclose that the problem exists, or was this the meeting where there was actually intended to be some conversation of how the district was going to fix the problem?
Correct. It was the latter. We were trying to figure out ways about how we were going to look at it, how we were going to prioritize, how to fix different things, and how we were going to move forward.
So was there a plan that had been presented and people were responding to that?
At that point, I didn't have a full-fledged plan. It was more, hey, this is a problem. This is what we're looking to do at it. We were looking at, well, how do you fix this problem? It looks like we're overstaffed here, here, and here. We're shrinking in enrollment. So we need to be cognizant as a community. How do we do this and do this in the best way possible? What ended up happening after that meeting is myself, the superintendent, and actually our admin team, we came together. We found positions ones that were going to resign, other ones that were not effective. And we worked through the process, and we did that over several weeks. And the beauty of that process is that we were able to work as a team in that moment, and I no longer felt so isolated as I was in that first meeting. But that did come to fruition. We were able to cut the money out. We turned it around, and I was able to actually have us with a small surplus after the first year. And so I consider that one of my,
pretty quickly.
I felt very proud of that because we went from such a heavy deficit to a small positive. It wasn't much. It was just a little over 100,000, but it was in the right direction.
Charlie, I get that this was a new experience for you, and I wonder if I could ask you now to think back in hindsight, if there was maybe some strategy involved in that moment, in that this meeting was intended to be a messy, angry kind of meeting because it was important that people understand the seriousness of the problem and feel that they had a chance to vent and, kind of get out their suggestions and worries and concerns, with the idea that in follow-up to that, the work would be done to figure this out. I'm not saying that it was at all manipulative or Machiavellian to do it, but in retrospect, do you think that there actually was a strategy like that?
Yes. Honestly, when I look back on it, there was, and that was the strategy, to be very honest and transparent with the public. That was the strategy, that this was a serious issue and we were working to fix it. And in hindsight, I think of it, it was actually a great opportunity. I was amazed, but I was able to answer most every question that came my way. And I was able to talk with them. I didn't lose my cool, which is, looking back on that, is even a little miraculous. I say that I laughed because my board chair looked at me. He's like, you act like you've been doing this a lot longer than a few months. So he said, congratulations to you. You made it through that piece.
And I'm assuming that this community had that same sense of connection, that same weight of responsibility, that these people know you. And so the messages that are being exchanged between people are not just transactional. They're actually about the relationship of people in the community.
And that's exactly right, because we're talking about real people losing their jobs. And that was a very difficult part, to look at those people in the face and know that just to see them like that, to see them that, we were affecting their future directly. And that was a hard thing for me. And so and looking back in retrospect, it also taught me that this isn't just a position. This isn't just some monetary transaction. This is a life and a future. And this is somebody's life that you're playing with. And so it's a very sacred responsibility when you hold those things. I think when you hold the future of somebody in your hands, it makes you think about, what could I have done differently? And in that situation, there wasn't anything because I inherited it. But that has kind of shaped how I look at it now. Now it's like, okay, what can I do to make sure that I'm not in that position again? That I'm not ever in a position where I have to look someone in the eyes and say, I have to let you go because of funding reasons. Performance issues are obviously different things. And I've had that conversation a number of times, but it helped me gain an appreciation of the weight that you hold in somebody's life and future in your hands.
Again, take me back to that time. I gather from our conversation that you recognized the mathematics of this early on. When did it dawn on you the emotional levels that this would operate on as well? I assume it was math first, emotions later?
It was exactly correct. Math first. And the math was absolutely stunning. When I came over it, I made sure I was correct. That's one of those things when you see it, it's like, okay, did I miscalculate something somewhere? Did I do something wrong? And so you check yourself because it is such a decision of high magnitude. And so I made sure I checked myself, made sure I was like, okay, this is correct. The emotional response was one that was probably the part I was most unprepared for at that point. The emotional response, and again, that's what has kind of formed my outlook now. That I look at the responsibility and the weight that you hold when you hold these people's futures in your hand. And so that was probably that emotional part I was not ready for.
What's the advice that you would give to someone who is starting a position now as a chief operations officer or a budget responsible person for a school district when they see the math? What would you tell them they need to do next, and what about that?
I think the thing I would tell them first is that number one, make sure your math is 100%. Make sure you check that, triple check it, and then be very careful how you reveal that first. And meaning that, you need to have a trusted group of friends. That the one thing that I didn't have at that time was a group that I could go to, talk to, and talk through these things who had been there before. So in my case, if I were to have a new business manager or CFO in my group, I'd have them call me and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. What would you advise? And that way I could talk to them. And being in that situation is so lonely.
I'm sorry, you're saying when you say a group of friends, you're not talking about social friends outside of the district.
No.
You're saying people within the district who share responsibility here, who you can trust and reveal what you've uncovered and bring them in to the equation of how do we recognize this and how do we advance figuring out how to get out of this?
Correct. And in my current role, my superintendent and I have a great relationship. And so I'm able to do that now. I'm able to talk with him about it. This is what I found. And so then I'm able to see and talk about that with him. And the thing with him is he's been in the education business for almost 40 years. And so he knows, and he's been through these different pieces. And so that experience has helped me just be able to know how to communicate that. So when I was there, I found that number one, I wasn't prepared for the emotional response, one. And two, I didn't have anyone that could help coach me through that situation. I was completely on my own. I was trying to figure out heads and tails of being in the education world. And so I didn't know their perspective. And so now I have a group within my district that I have that relationship with that. And even then, I also have a state group that I have that relationship with too, that I can bring it to them on a confidential level and they can help give me some perspective, which is something I lacked a lot at that time.
Was that your first experience working with a school district?
Yes, it was.
Before that, were you working in the business world? Are you a numbers guy from the business sector somehow?
Great question. So I had actually been working with the state of Wyoming doing school facilities. This is how I got into this, is that at that point in time, I had left the University of Wyoming after my master's program. I had finished up there and I was hired on by the state of Wyoming doing school facilities. And at that time, we had done somewhere near $3 billion worth of school facilities statewide. And so my role was to go to each district and to work with their district to help build different facilities, work on different capital projects. And I built a relationship with many districts that way, going through statewide. And so that was my responsibility all statewide, is to go help go through procurement processes with them, go through capital construction, and even help them with different public processes.
That sounds like really great nuts and bolts work and important work. It doesn't sound like there would have been a lot of emotional volatility in that procurement work, right?
No, and it's very cut and dried. I had state statutes I had to follow. Everybody knew that, and I couldn't really vary from that. And so that's the biggest difference is, when I come in and say, hey, it's a lot easier being the good guy coming in and say, hey, you guys have $3 million to do this X, Y, and Z project, and I'm going to help you get there. That's a much different conversation than saying, guys, we have to cut 1.1 million and it's going to require us to cut some positions. how do we do that? And it's a much different conversation.
I get this, and I get that you are the nuts and bolts numbers guy who can figure this out. Obviously, you did. You got them back to a positive position. But now I'm really interested. If the Wyoming School Boards Association called on you, Charlie, and said, "We want you to give a presentation at the next annual conference, and we want it to be on the emotional intelligence of making nuts and bolts decisions, of budgetary decisions," what's the advice that you would give your colleagues about what they need to know about managing emotional situations?
That is a great question. Wow. So thinking about what I've learned, what I've also done, I would talk with them about expectations. What are the expectations that they're going in with this? Number one. And number two, I would say, making sure that you have, that you're not in it alone, that no matter what your trusted group of friends is in your organization, that it's not done in a silo, and that you're able to see and hear their perspective and wisdom and experience. The thing is, in education, many times we have all this experience and the educators around you. And I found that in my first job, I just didn't quite know how to tap into that. If I now knowing what I know, I've learned to tap into that experience and to see their perspective, because many of these administrators I work with have been in the business for 25, 30 years, and they know how to talk with teachers. They know how to communicate that message down. They know what things you need to avoid and how you need to not say certain things. And so if they were to give me an opportunity to present, I would talk to them about, basically making sure that you have your team in place, but also making sure that that you definitely just, I don't know how I'd say this, but that you basically learn how to use what's around you, make it a more collaborative experience. That's what I would tell you, is that the thing I tried to do the first time, just because I didn't know any better, is I tried to do it by myself, and I came to learn that no, that's too big of a burden for one person to carry, and it needs to be a collaborative process, and you need to work as that team, and things go a lot better that way. It's interesting. We learned this parable. So a mule by itself will carry about 400 pounds. But if you put two mules together that are the same kind of weight and strength, they'll pull 1,200 pounds together. And so it's the exponential pull of multiple people. And so if you have the people that you can team up with and that you can do these things, that you can tap from their experience, your efforts are greatly multiplied. And it was never meant for us to do it alone.
Charlie, we're beginning to wrap up, and I have one last big question for you. I imagine that there are leaders who are listening to our conversation who may be walking into their own defining moments right now. And I'm wondering what you would want them to understand about the relationship between truth and self-awareness and peace of mind and dealing with the reality of disappointed, angry people that they're about to see. What would you tell them to do in the moment?
So in the moment, I would tell them, take a deep breath, one, and two, don't take it personally. Like, the thing is that these people are scared, angry, frustrated, upset, because it does affect their lives. And so you can't take that personally. You can't say that, oh, they're just trying to harm me personally. You have to be okay knowing that they have that space to be upset, frustrated too, and you have to allow them that. I think the other thing I learned is that you need to probably have a little grace for them, because there are moments in your life you're that frustrated person too. And so I think, as you come to your defining moments, don't be alone. Some people I know, they're, people talk about, well, how do I not be alone? Well, some people turn to religion and turn to prayer that way. That's how some people deal with that. There are some people who turn to trusted colleagues and friends and family. But my advice is, don't be alone. Don't be alone in that moment. know that, yeah, sometimes that those moments hurt, but it's also not the end. And that, I think that's the other thing, is I would tell them, this is just a part of the journey, and don't let it be the end.
Charlie Cauffman, it's been great talking to you. And I thank you so much for being open to this conversation and being willing to relive and share the lessons of a painful part of your career. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'm glad I did this.
My thanks again to Charlie Cauffman, Chief Operations Officer at Washakie County School District Number 1 in Whirlwind, Wyoming. It was a really great conversation. What really resonates for me is his clarity about truth. Leadership, as he describes it, is not about winning approval. It's about doing the hard math and telling the truth as you understand it, and finding the steadiness to live with the decisions that may not please everyone. In a small community, that's obviously not abstract. It's personal. It shows up at public meetings, in grocery store aisles, in conversations with friends and neighbors, and in the moments when you ask yourself whether you acted with integrity. Charlie's experience reminds us that being at peace with yourself is not arrogance, it's discipline. It's the inner work that allows you to serve without becoming reactive or defensive. Whether you serve in a school district or a municipality, the lesson travels. You cannot control the reaction, but you can certainly control your own integrity. And over time, that steadiness builds trust, not only in you as a leader, but in the very institutions that you are entrusted to steward. Hey, if this conversation sparked an idea, raised a question, or stirred something in your own leadership journey, I'd love to hear from you. Call me at 602-688-2724 and leave a message, ask a question, share a reflection, or just suggest a topic you'd like to hear explored more deeply. I listen to every message, and your input genuinely helps shape future episodes. If you'd be open to sharing some of the hard-earned lessons from your own leadership journey, I invite you to apply to be a guest. You'll find the podcast guest link in the show notes. Your story may help another leader see their own work more clearly as they serve their community. If you care about strengthening civic life through better conversations, I invite you to subscribe to my Substack column, Democracy Runs on Dialogue. You'll find a link in the show notes, and I'd be glad to invite you into the dialogue there. Community Catalysts is edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.